Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to welcome you to this webinar on the DoD's fiscal year 2025 Science and Technology Budget Request. I am David Norquist, President and CEO of the National Defense Industrial Association. NDIA and our affiliate organization, the Emerging Technologies Institute, is pleased to be joined by our co-hosting organizations, the Association of American Universities, the Association of Public and Land-Grant Universities, and the Professional Services Council. These organizations represent a broad cross-section of defense, industry, and universities who make up the defense innovation community. The DoD science and technology programs are key to assuring that our nation has superiority on the battlefield and is equipping our warfighters with the best possible technologies, whether these are coming from defense industry, academia, or the commercial sector. We are all pleased that we have this opportunity to hear about the science and technology budget priorities of the Department of Defense, as reflected in the currently released FY25 budget request, which is currently under consideration on Capitol Hill. To discuss these priorities, we are honored to have all the key technical leadership of OSD R&E, the services, and DARPA, who will each provide an overview of their organization's budget priorities. To briefly introduce the speakers, we have the Honorable Heidi Shyu, who serves as the Undersecretary of Defense for Research and Engineering. Secretary Shyu has a distinguished career in government and industry, including formerly service as the Service Acquisition Executive for the United States Army. The Honorable Dr. Aprille Ericsson, who serves as the Assistant Secretary of Defense for Science and Technology. Before being confirmed as the inaugural Assistant Secretary for S&T, Dr. Ericsson spent over 3 decades at NASA in a variety of leadership, program management, and engineering roles. Christopher Manning, Deputy Assistant Secretary of the Army for Research and Technology. He previously served as the Deputy Director of the Force Development Office of the Deputy Chief of Staff, G8, which plans, develops, and resources Army programs. Dr. Thomas Fu, head of the Sea Warfare and Weapons Department of the Office of Naval Research. Prior to this role, he held positions at the Naval Surface Warfare Center, Carter-Rock Division. Kristen Baldwin, Deputy Assistant Secretary of the Air Force for Science, Technology, and Engineering. Secretary Baldwin previously held leadership positions in OSD R&E and AT&L. Dr. Stephanie Tompkins, the Director of the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, known as DARPA. Dr. Tompkins is a former Army intelligence officer who has also worked as the VP for Research at the Colorado School of Mines and Industry at SAIC. Now, before we begin, some brief administrative remarks. At the end of the presentation, the audience will have the opportunity to ask the panelists some questions. We ask the audience to submit those questions into the question panel on your screen throughout the presentation. We will do our best to get through as many questions as we can and appreciate your patience. And if you are a member of the press, please identify yourself with your name, organization, and capital PRESS, press, in capital letters before your question. Finally, we are recording today's webinar and will post the recording after the event on ETI's YouTube page. It is now my honor to turn over the proceedings to the Honorable Heidi Shyu. Secretary Shyu.
Good afternoon. It's great to be here with you guys today. Thank you, Honorable Norquist, for hosting this. This is the 3rd year that we have been doing this, so it's a delight for all of us to share our insights in terms of our priorities with all of you today. Okay. So what I will do is probably paint a big picture at the 100,000-foot level and let each of the services talk about their priorities within their service. If you can go to the first chart, please. Great. So this pretty much gives you a big picture in terms of where we are. In terms of FY25 S&T PB, we are requesting $17.2 billion, slightly lower than last year's PB, which was $17.8 billion. And that is primarily driven by the fact that a lot more of the requests in terms of priorities went into the 6.4 bin as opposed to 6.1 to 6.3. Okay. And if you look at where we are, FY25 S&T is 2% of the total FY25 DoD PB budget. And if you look at compared to last year, it was 2.1% of the total DoD PB budget. So it's a drop of 0.1%. Okay. Some of the good news is there's been a 33% increase in SBIR and STTR transitions. And this is where we are focusing on transitioning more of the technologies that we are developing with small businesses as well as university to push it over into the services. So the 33% increase in cyber transition into phase 3 since 21 shows about increase of $954 million in FY23. That's a really good story. Obviously, we don't have 24 yet because we're only partway through the year. Okay. We also focus on increasing the number of new suppliers or new vendors into the technology ecosystem. So we increase the number of new cyber vendors by 53% since FY21. Big jump. The other thing is every single service is mapping into the 14 critical technology areas that I identified about 2 years ago. And the majority of our S&T priorities are very well mapped into that. And final thing I wanted to share with you guys is we are very much actively working on the ability to track our investment. Because one of the key things that Hill always asks is, what are you investing in the 6.1, 6.1, 6.2, 6.3, 6.4? How does it get into the hands of our warfighter? So about 2 years ago, we started down this journey to have much better visibility in terms of what we are tracking in terms of 6.1, 6.2, 6.3, and 6.4s. And this is done by the Transition Tracking Action Group. This is a group that has participation that's led by R&E, but it has participation with acquisition and sustainment, as well as each one of the services, and as well as CDAO. We're all in collaboration in this. Next chart. So getting into a little bit more detail in terms of where our funding is going in the S&T arena, you can see our $17.2 billion is 48% of that is defense-wide. So that means R&E funding, DIU, DARPA, SCO, MDA, TRMC, etc. That's within that biggest chunk of the pie. Okay. The next piece is 16% is from the Army, 15% for the Navy, another 16% from the Air Force, and 5% from our newest force, which is the Space Force. And often a question is asked, how do you split that between 6.1, 6.2, 6.3? So what you see there in the donut chart on the bottom there, it shows 14% of all of our S&T budget goes into 6.1 basic research, and 34% goes into more of the applied research, and 52% goes to 6.3. And if you wanted to see the composition of 6.1, 6.2, 6.3, as in terms of each of the organizations, you have a bar chart on the right that lays it out exactly which bin the funding is going. Next chart. Another way to take a look at is what is our trend from in the last 3 years. So we mapped out from 23, 24, and 25, where our investment activities has gone into in terms of budget activity in 6.1, 6.2, and 6.3. It's relatively consistent. If you look at the 6.1, approximately $2.4, $2.5 billion. And 6.2 is about $5.9 billion and 6.3 is about $9 billion. Next chart. Another way that we slice this is by the critical technology areas. There are 14 critical technology area that we laid out about a year and a half ago. And if you see where the bulk of our funding is going via 6.1, 6.2, and 6.3 by technology area, this spells it out pretty well. The biggest bar chart is trusted AI and autonomy, so that's not going to be surprising. The second area that we fund a lot of money in is in the space technology arena. The third piece is in integrated sensing and cyber. You can see those three categories of areas we're funding compose about 65% of our S&T budget. The other thing I want to point out, in the area of advanced materials, biotechnology, quantum, and future G, i.e. beyond 5G, these are the four emerging technology areas in which Dr. Ericsson will go into a little bit more detail on. Next chart. What we have done in the last 2 years is take our national defense strategy and mapped it into our national defense science and technology strategy that was released in 2023. And from that, we've been to three major categories in which we are pursuing. The first category is us focusing on the joint mission. So we talk about multitude of different things we're doing in focusing on the joint mission because every conflict we get into, it is truly a joint fight. It is not being fought by a single service. So we laid out the number of activities we have within the joint mission arena. The second piece that's very important is creating fielding capabilities at speed and at scale. So a lot of activity we have ongoing in that categories, especially in the area of radar, the Rapid Defense Experimentation Reserve, as well as scaling up via the APFIT funding, accelerate fielding and procurement and fielding of innovative technologies is very much focused on that arena. Okay. The third piece and third category that we have to ensure that's a foundation for our research and development by building a solid foundation, namely recruiting and retaining and cultivating talent into the DoD. Okay, a lot of this, not surprisingly, is focused on the STEM activities, which once again, Dr. Ericsson will talk about, right? I will tell you one other thing that's very important. This is an area that DepSecDev has said. Now that we have laid out our strategy, we want to make sure that we have a strategic management plan to track how well are we doing relative to the plan that we've laid out. Well, as you guys all know, this is what companies do on the outside every single year. So DoD is actually going down the exact same path, tracking, establishing metrics, and seeing how well we're doing relative to our metrics. Next, please. I want to share a little bit with you guys about what we're doing in the area of cyber. In terms of phase 1, phase 2, as well as phase 3 funding, we spent about $2.6 billion in FY23. And if you take a look at that portion of the cyber funding, it's not surprising that integrated sensing and cyber, trusted AI and autonomy, as well as space technology is also the same top 3 areas that we are awarding small business to focus on. If you take a look at those 3 pieces of the technology area, That's composed about almost 72% of our super sitter funding, quite a big chunk. Take a, and, of course, that's pretty consistent. So this is not a dramatic shift in terms of what we're asking small business to provide. It doesn't change from our S&T priorities. Okay, next, please. This is the other good story that I talked about a little bit earlier. If you take a look at the phase 3 funding, now remember, phase 3 funding is not funded by SuperSitter. It is funded via the program offices. That literally is the transition funding beyond 6.3. Okay, and we have successively increased that amount of funding across the last 3 years. And on the right side of that, that shows the number of new entrants coming into the DoD in the SuperSitter arena. So if you look at the light blue on the top, those are the number of new companies that submitted SuperSitter proposals and actually won phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3. So it's a good news story. Every single year, we're increasing new entrants coming into the DoD. Next, please. So I've talked about we're on a journey to start to track how well do we transition our technology. What does that funnel look like on 6.1, 6.2, 6.3, 6.4, et cetera? Okay, so I have to give us the TTAG a lot of credit because they've been working very hard and working well with the services to start to track details in terms of what we are transitioning out of 6.1, 6.2, 6.3 into the 6.4. So the way we keep track of transition pathways, the most typical way that people think about is transitioning into a program of record, right? So that's the one pathway. However, it could be a piece of software that would deliver a capability, to upgrade a capability that's already been fielded. So that's a different way of fielding a new capability. Okay. The other way could very well be we have developed a technology. The technology is being utilized by a DoD prime or commercial company. We then end up procuring that technology. And the fourth way is we've transitioned technology from the DoD. It could be used by another government agency. So we're on the journey to start to dive into the details. Most of these 105 projects that you've seen that's tracked by the services into 6.4 are primarily into really programs that they have. So we're starting to track the other specific transition pathways. I will give you an example. Okay, we have developed some capabilities as part of a Rapid Defense Experimentation Reserve, which is the radar activities. Once we developed it and it's mature, and the services say we really would like to have it, there are ways that we can just put it right onto the GSA schedule, and literally a service that want to procure it just can buy it outright. So it doesn't have to go through a long procurement process into a program of record. Okay. The other way that I want to briefly talk about is we have to date funded 38 companies via APFIT. This is the Accelerated Procurement and Fielding of Innovative Technology. This is a pot of money that this year, 2 years ago, we got 100 million. Last year, we got 150 million. And this year, we actually got $300 million, which is great. We're helping to fund small companies to get into low rate initial production. This is helping them to bridge the valley of death that they typically face from 6.3 to get into 6.4 and on to into low rate initial production. Okay, so helping out those 38 companies, and what we are seeing, the first tranche back 2 years ago is already fielding into the services and the combatant commanders. So the latest tranche was announced, and the companies were awarded between 10 to about $23 million to accelerate their low-rate initial production. So this gives you a big picture of what we're working on. Would like to transfer over to Dr. Ericsson.
All right, thank you. All right, let me start off with the first slide, please. So I thought I would start off with just understanding what is the Science and Technology Office's main components. Of course, as you understand that I sit under the Research and Engineering Office for Undersecretary Shyu, and I would say we do about 60 to 65% of this enterprise's thrust and goals. As you know, it's a little bit color-coded to kind of separate what the different DASDs, the Deputy Assistant Secretaries of Defense do, and I'm just going to outline really broadly what their fundamental focus is. So the first one is foundations. It really focuses on the basic research, the Department of Defense laboratories, the infrastructure associated with it. I'll mention that there are also the federally funded research and development centers and the university affiliated research centers under that portion of the portfolio. Honorable Shyu already mentioned also that the STEM and workforce focus for our science and technology and overall R&E are also focused under that particular DASD. The next one is futures, and that comprised largely of two major components: the technology and technical innovation industry. Actually, I said it backwards. Technical industrial innovation base. And then there's what we typically highlight as the emerging technologies. I want you to note too that right under below are also what we consider of the 14 critical technologies that were highlighted by Honorable Shyu. There are 4 that we've considered as really emerging under these critical technologies. So they're a little bit more infantile, and that's why they've been designated as the emerging, really kind of dovetailing well with what we consider basic research. The last of the DASDs is our program and protection, system security, and maintaining that technological advantage. It's really about focusing on how do we protect our IPA, but also making sure that we eventually transition the technology in a way that is productive for the United States and its allied partners. We can go to the next slide. I also wanted to show how we fit in the National Defense Science and Technology Strategy. So this is a snapshot. As you begin to look at how Honorable Shyu showed the transition from each of the regulations and strategy for the nation, it was released in 2023, the NDSTS, to guide our priorities and to shape the fiscal investments for programming. The NDSTS is a linking document between our national defense strategy, the national military strategy, and the Department of Defense science and research community. Highlighted here, I wanted to point out the 3 lines of effort. The first one being focusing on the joint mission, the second one, create and field capabilities at speed and scale, and then the last one, ensure the foundations for research and defense development. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, the lines of effort, and that was what the LOE, it's funny, the first time I saw that, I went, is that lines of effort? Because that's what it is at NASA. The difference here is really focusing on that joint mission. You can read faster than I'm going to read on the slides, but I wanted to point out a couple of things. So S&T really provides oversight and advocacy for the Department's science and technology enterprise. We want to foster the health of the department's entire S&T portfolio, focusing here again on the 6.1 and 6.3 funding lines. And we also chair the Science and Technology XCOM. We provide leadership for basic research in emerging science and technology, mentioning again those 4 areas of biotechnology, quantum, and by the way, I think that's how she stole me from NASA, because I was like, oh, I get to continue to work on quantum, very cool. I call that sexy science. Future G, and then advanced materials. And as you look at these 4 different areas, you'll also notice that they're very cross-cutting, and we can elaborate a little bit on how we see those cross-cuttings as well. We also want to accelerate technology advancements by harnessing all of DoD's science, technology, and innovation base, and particularly looking at the STEM ecosystem of many of you that are here, part of that academia, small business, our manufacturing industry, as well as the other government agencies and our allied partners as well. We advocate for the department's science and technology workforce. That workforce is the education, and I say to really to hire and inspire and hire, train and retain, and to accelerate the use of our technology as a growth for our labs and for our uses in the overall science and tech world. All right, next slide, please. Honorable Shyu already mentioned the valleys of death, and she spoke specifically about the sort of later one, but I actually see multiple instances of valleys of death. We're here to really help to bridge the industry partners across those valleys of death, as well as our DoD researchers as well. We really help to facilitate and coordinate the entire department's S&T efforts, and that's interagency, internal and international partnerships, as I mentioned. We want to execute the defense-wide manufacturing science and technology programs and coordinate the service and agencies' ManTech programs. Lastly, on this slide, we govern the department's federally funded research facilities, as I mentioned, the university affiliated research centers as well. And in particular, we sponsor 3 of the FFRDCs in our portfolio. Next slide, please. For that last LOE3, we encourage diversity, equity, inclusion through focused outreach, particularly for the nation's historically Black colleges and universities and minority institutions. We really want to include the entire, what we have considered underserved populations, to really contribute across the nation in the help to get us moving again and passing and surpassing in our technology capabilities. We really also want to shape those critical technology protection policies, and that's ongoing, as we have had ongoing threats to the IPA for the investments we make. We're really making sure we provide the policies and the development oversight for those new policies in the last few years. DoD's, of course, SITR programs and execution of that is another plus in my bucket for this portfolio. And I think that Honorable Shyu has really highlighted some of the successes we've had in the last few years. Lastly, we want to preserve the knowledge and curate information and facilitate innovation through our Defense Technology Information Center. We call that DTEC. You probably saw that on the logic org chart. All right, let's move into the next slide, please. And this is a great snapshot of the DoD S&T ecosystem. As you can see, we're alive across the United States and the world. It's really a critical infrastructure in the areas of budget concern, and our ability to invest in the recapitalization is paramount. The data showed is actually the data here for the PBR 25. So this is very most recent, with some growth in a few areas. I'm not going to read through many of the pluses here, but I figured this would be great to show how we're actively engaged across the US. Next slide, please. So as I dig down a little bit, we actually oversee the department's 2.75 billion basic research portfolios. This sets the department's wide research policies and conducts enterprise-wide assessments to ensure balance and coherence and alignment to our strategies. We manage multiple programs of its own to foster innovative ideas, encourage collaboration, and guide the department's scientific investments. Just a few, for example, we have already mentioned the HBCU and the MI programs, but the Vannevar Bush and Minerva research programs as well. We serve as the main liaison for DoD and the academic community. STEM is one of the things that I really push at NASA. I'm here to help us to push what the capabilities and to inspire the next generation through our STEM programs. Building upon the nation's DoD STEM talent, we're going to coordinate these cohesive STEM activities across our pre-K through 20 plus. I actually say from K to gray, because I believe it's very important to not only talk about our academic communities, but our communities in the larger United States, meaning the people that pay the tax bills. They ought to need to know what we do in the Department of Defense, because it's their tax dollars that help to pay for the things we do. Next slide, please. So this chart really talks about how our approach to security, and I just wanted to make the academic community more aware, as well as our small business, of things that we have to do in terms of informing our partnerships, and also doing due diligence to really be able to achieve our greatest net and technology advantage. It's important to note that the research security is also prioritized across funding lines, and it's nested within our partnerships in industry. Next slide, please. I've already mentioned, and it's just to remind people with a little bit clearer, I think, what are the 14 critical technologies, what we consider 4 seed areas to the left. But we've really been investing across R&E's critical technology areas by championing the research and science and technology and engineering and innovation for those areas. In this ever-shifting and fast-moving global environment, one can stay abreast or by being stagnant. So we're constantly moving our global environment and technology advantage. The department cannot rely on today's technology to ensure military and technological dominance tomorrow. It's imperative for the department to nurture the early research and discover new scientific breakthroughs to prevent technological surprise. Next slide, please. Just to dig down a little bit into the actual dollars, Ms. Shyu has already presented this chart, but I just wanted us to highlight the actual investments that are made for what I call the emerging technologies. If you notice off to the right in the percentages, they start off with a smaller investment because we are not approaching as much of the 6.3 and 6.4 movement. So the investments begin small and they begin to grow. As you can see, the hypersonics is about 1.4% of the investments made here. And then biotechnology, which is a little bit lower, 1.3%, and then quantum with the 0.4% and future G at 0.2%. Thanks. Next slide. This is also a repeat of the slide from Honorable Shyu. If you notice, though, pointing out again the investments for the 4 emerging technology area, which is down at the bottom, if you notice the bar there. The one thing to note is the concentration of the 6.1 and 6.2 and 6.3 money. You can see there with the various bars. There is a larger contribution as we move into advanced materials. We're really starting to see the successes there as we move that more fundamentally into the 6.3 funding lines. All right, next slide. We wanted also to show how we are focusing on various areas of community of interest. These are really our collaborations with our Alliance 21 community of interest. We coordinate and collaborate efforts across cross-cutting science and technology. That's one of the things that I've really been pushing is to make sure that we're not being siloed and that each of the technology areas can learn from each other, provide lessons learned so that we can grow and we can find niches of where there's a collaboration to help to further or speed up the transition to providing a fundamental product. Next slide, please. I love this chart because it's got a bit of movement for our manufacturing and innovative institutes network. And as we begin to grow that network, here are just a few of the successes across since launching in 2012. The committed funding there has been 1.25 billion. And with the federal investments and private and state investments, there's an additional 2 billion there. We have over 1,500 companies, universities, and nonprofit members that are part of the partnerships. And then this, as mentioned earlier, is across the 49 states, Washington, D.C., and Puerto Rico included. Just a few successes here with the BioMade, the digital manufacturing, the lightweight materials, and then AIM here. Can you go back once? There you go. Thank you. And then we have the BioFab USA. Further down, you have the advanced fibers, textiles, and then the advanced robotics. And then, and I missed this one, which is, but down at the bottom is the American makes. And then going over to the West Coast, we've got Netflix with the flexible hybrid electronics. Currently, our status is 785 million for Department of Defense. And the memberships have currently in a cost sharing mode of 1.8 billion. One thing that warms my heart, of course, is the 55,000 students, teachers, and the workforce that are trained through these STEM activities and advanced manufacturing skills that are provided by the MIIs and their partner organizations. Okay. And I think that's it for me. So I hand it off to my colleague.
Hey, good afternoon. My name is Chris Manning. I am the Deputy Assistant Secretary of the Army for Research and Technology. Today, I'm going to give you a rundown of PV25 overview for Army S&T. I've been in the job for about 6 months, and over the 6 months, 3 priorities have emerged for me to tackle in the role. The first being technology transition is job number 1. And I really view that from a perspective of not just the metric of measuring the transition at the end, but looking at technology transition as a destination and ensuring as we do our 6.1 and 6.2 research, we keep that destination in mind and take appropriate actions to set the conditions for the continual step forward as the tech matures. The second priority area being preserving technological advantage for the next unpredicted fight. So how do we weight the main effort, get after important areas, but also preserve our technology advantage in the Army so that we can pivot should the next fight be not what we predict, but be something else. And the third being win through data, kind of all things data, from a perspective of using data to inform what research do we go after, what chemical compounds show the most promise to then go, hey, let's go look at that for a particular capability. It can be if our S&T is producing data, how do we make sure that data can effectively integrate across all our Army S&T enterprise as well as the joint force. Or it can be as simply as, hey, how do we administer our S&T and manage it from a data and an analytics perspective? We'll go to the next chart. So this chart shows, hey, how Army S&T is organized. The top half kind of shows the alignment of policy, budget, and oversight. So I work for the Assistant Secretary of the Army for Acquisition, Logistics, and Technology, the Honorable Mr. Bush. I'll end under the Secretary and the Undersecretary. On the bottom half of this chart, it talks, where do we execute S&T in the Army? And so we executed through 4 commands, Army Futures Command, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, U.S. Army Space and Missile Defense Command, and then an element out of headquarters DAG-1. And you can kind of see the percentages as to the heavy hitter is Army Futures Command executing 81% of our S&T in the Army, followed by the Corps of Engineers with 15%, and then SMDC and headquarters DAG-1, each executing around 2%. Let's go to the next chart. So this chart depicts kind of going from total Army TOA to RDT&E down to S&T. The top half is PB25. The bottom half shows what we look like for PB24. And you see, so you could get some comparison. So going from 186 billion in 25 total obligation authority down to 14 billion in RDT&E, and the segment of that is S&T is 2.6 billion in PB25. Relatively flat from a dollar or whole dollar perspective between 24 and 25 between the 2 years. Another way we look at this is S&T in our Army modernization budget across all Army modernization runs around 9 to 10% of our modernization budget is our science and technology investments. Okay, to the next chart. All right, so hey, how do we look at that investment kind of the next level down? And so first I'll start in the top right because hey, you saw 2.6 on the previous chart, and on the title chart this shows 3.2. So this is our S&T activities as well as a number of activities outside S&T that are that we manage in conjunction with the S&T enterprise. So they're closely linked. So we provide oversight of them together. So to see the breakout, if you shift down to the bottom left of the chart, you can see what is specifically S&T on the top of that, and then the other funding of BA 4, 6, and 7, as well as procurement in the bottom half of that table on the left. I'll talk through a few of the major activities in this giant pie chart. We'll start top center, and that is the high performance computing modernization program. So the Army is the executive agent managing activity across on behalf of OSD across all the services. And so that 316 million, 10% of this total pie is both the RDT&E as well as all the procurement dollars are really that are reflected on this chart are in that high performance computing environment. Now, if we shift one step to the left counterclockwise, basic research, that's the biggest majority of this portfolio. That's where all our seed corn is. That's where we're investing for the far future. It gives you 514 million, 16% of our total S&T budget. I'll shift down to the bottom left, the ground portfolio. It's a very nondescript way of saying, well, what is ground? So that 474 million is getting after our research in lethality, robotics, armor, as well as active protection and electrification and mobility. So that's where our investments are in that ground domain. So I'm shift over to the right-hand side of the chart, the big brown section, which also is somewhat encompassing the tan section right next to it. And that is our weapons portfolio, which encompasses all of air and missile defense and long-range precision fighters. And that is where we're doing Army S&T activities in support of those two Army modernization priorities, air and missile defense, as well as long-range precision fighters. And the final area I'll hit on this chart is in the top right green wedge, 354 million. You'll note that matches the 354 million in BA4. That's all BA4 money, and that's comprised of two segments. That is, one portion is the Army 6-4 money that is associated with the OSD Raider program. So that's where that money is. And the other part of it is Army Tech Maturation Initiative program. And so this is our activities where we have S&T projects as they achieve TRL 6. If they're on a path to transition to a new program and the new program doesn't have funding yet, we use this funding to continue to advance from TRL 6 to TRL 7 to allow time so that we can align the program funding to be able to receive that effectively. Go to the next chart. So this chart shows our PB24 to PB25, just a different lens, looking at those portfolios. Really minor moves, relatively flat across those portfolios, minor changes. Most of those are associated with a 6.2 project progresses to 6.3 or 6.3 project transitions, and we start a new project, perhaps in a different portfolio in 6.2 or 6.3. You will note the purple indicates our maturation and Army Raider funding is called out. Next chart. So there are a number of activities that the Army executes on behalf as executive agent for across the joint services in support of OSD. And so this chart attempts to capture that and depict, hey, what work are we doing in support of not just the Army, but the joint services. And so I'll start at the pie in the top left, and that shows a BA1 through BA3, really indicating, well, hey, what is Army Core S&T that's supporting Army programs, and then where are we doing S&T activities in BA2 and BA3 that support all the services, including the Army. So that's about 13% of the Army BA1 through BA3 is in support of those joint activities. I will note that in the bar graph on the bottom, it's more than just 6.3. So you'll see the purple indicating the 6.4 and the I guess gold indicating the procurement dollars. And so, and then just to point out that Raider funding isn't really an activity we manage. That's really more the money where the money is for Raider, and then that's the run through the OSD Raider program. We'll go to the next chart. So I talked technology transition as job one, as I, 6 months in the seat. So how do we look at technology transition? What is our technology transition methodology? This is a chart that we use to think through it. My predecessor, Mr. Willie Nelson, kind of launched this last year, and we're continuing to carry it forward. And so we look at this chart. It's quite a busy chart. On the left-hand side, to get after those R&E definitions of transition, that is transition to another government agency, transition to industry. And on the right-hand side, getting after those R&E definitions of fielding new capability, insertion of technology into a defense program, follow-on tech maturation, and software. So we look at it, hey, one more level down, what are the specific transition channels to get after those different capabilities? 5 of them on the left, 5 of them on the right. And so we have 10 transition channels that we have identified in the Army that fit this methodology. And then this is the first year we've started tracking against that methodology. So you can see the numbers next to each one of those channels indicate the S&T projected transitions, the quantity as well as the percentage of the total transitions, 729, and we'll continue to track and reiterate on this as we move forward. 2 notable Army programs that are great examples of S&T transitions that are high profile currently. One is the precision strike missile. So that is a activity that has 2 parallel parts of it. One is the program record activity, PRISM Inc. 1, Inc. 2, Inc. 3, Inc. 4. At the same time, we have an S&T maturation that is maturing the technology, and as that technology matures to support PRISM, it's spiraling into to those program increments as appropriate. The second being the FLORA Future Long Range Assault Aircraft, which emerged out of S&T joint multi-role tech demonstrator. So 2 examples of, hey, where activities in this tech maturation initiative, or where activities in this tech transition methodology and how they're being successful. So we'll go to the next chart. So this last chart I have, and really I'm using this chart to try to depict how we're leveraging our Army prize competitions and SBIR programs in innovative ways to enhance our ability on a pathway to scale. And so the left-hand side of the chart is our X-Tech program, that's our Army prize competition. And so you can see the numbers there regarding, hey, what prize competitions did we execute? How much in cash prizes did we do? How many proposals did we review? On the top left-hand side. What I really want to focus on the bottom left-hand side is X-Tech Prime initiative that we launched in 23 and are continuing. And this concept here is to partner small business innovative companies with technology integrators that have proven pathway to scale, to incentivize that partnership early, to improve the probability of ultimately transitioning and getting on a pathway to scale. And so there were a total of 15 companies that we selected on this. They're on the path to submit for phase 2 SBIR programs up to $1.9 million. Shifting over to the right-hand side of this chart, our SBIR program in the Armies. In the Army, you can see the number of contracts that we awarded, dollars that we invested, the proposals that we reviewed, all FY23 numbers. What I want to focus on is the SBIR Catalyst program, similar to X-Tech Prime. This takes it one step farther. So this was, in order to be successful winner on this program, involves small business partnering with a defense integrator, as well as an Army program of record or Army customer coming in with funds to get after that. So 5 companies have been awarded this on the process to up to $15 million contracts to proceed. So those are existing ways to use our processes in innovative ways to try to accelerate our pathway to scale. The final thing on this chart I'll talk is in the center, and that's our rapid contracting activity that we launched with SuperSitter. We were experiencing was a number of a long lead time in getting these contracts awarded across our disparate S&T space. So we built a virtual contracting center of excellence with specific contracting officers across our contracting enterprise. We trained them on these specific SuperSitter contracts. We made that their focus. They've been able to drive down the contract time from 250 days to award a contract down to 21 days, and a number of contracts in 1 or 2 days. So that's a quick synopsis of Army S&T and PG25. I look forward to your question.
Hey, good afternoon, and thanks for having me. So Navy S&T's done a little bit different, but you'll see the common themes, which listening to this afternoon, it's comforting to hear that we've all come to the same conclusions, or we're actually reading the same guidance and doing what we're supposed to be doing, and we're actually doing it pretty well. So we'll go to the next slide. So what you see is the Office of Naval Research was stood up to basically encourage scientific research and recognition of its importance to the maintenance of future naval power. And I always give everybody on the Navy side a hard time about this. It actually says, and to the preservation of national security. So it's not just naval power. The Navy plays a role across all of with DoD and the preservation of national security. So it does play into it, and especially at the 6-1 level, the S&T level, how we work together and how we focus on that aspect within our services. So the Office of Naval Research, the S&T execution is done by the 5 departments across the bottom, codes 31, 32, 33, 34, 35, which you can think about C5ISRT, Ocean Battlespace Sensing, Sea Warfare and Weapons, which is my department, Warfighter Performance, Naval Air Warfare and Weapons, but also the 4 Echelon 2 commands, PMR 51, the Naval Research Lab, ONR Global, Naval X, and the Expeditionary Portfolio specifically focused on Marine Corps S&T needs. And so it's set up to do basically this the S&T execution for the Navy, but it's set up in this broad sense, and you'll see how it feeds into pretty much everything we've talked about this afternoon. But it's part of you'll see what's going on, and is this sort of urgency within the Navy, right? The Navy's got almost 100 ships out at sea right now. It is under threat, and it is trying to basically accelerate capability, maintain S&T advantage, and deliver what the S&T portfolio into the technologies and to the capabilities that the services need going forward. It also includes, as everybody's mentioned, the Naval STEM programs and the HBCMI programs. So next slide. So what's happening? So on the I guess if you're looking at the slide, the top left is America's Warfighting Navy from the Chief of Naval Operations, General Franchetti. You know, it talks about warfighters, warfighting, and the foundational basis that it grows from. And so what you see really is the sort of themes that came out of the National S&T strategy, and you see on the bottom left, the SECNAPS, One Navy, Marine Corps team, and what the department's priorities are. And those all roll into, including the National Defense S&T strategy, into the Navy's, the Naval S&T strategy, which was just signed out maybe a month ago, I guess. And so for this group to talk about priorities and how we're really focused, you see those naval S&T focus areas. It was important to write down the specific S&T areas, and they'll say, well, those don't perfectly align to the critical technology areas, because they're not just the technology areas, they are including the S&T areas that enable the technology areas in the future. But you will see the ones that Honorable Ms. Shyu mentioned, the materials piece, where we are very much emphasizing advanced materials as an enabler across to enable the new technologies. And so you'll see that crossover, but you also see the urgency that the Navy is acting under. And so what you see, the SecNav's statement of, I encourage all of you, nation scientists, engineers, researchers, inventors, entrepreneurs, and problem solvers to join us. We're indeed in an innovation race, and it's one we must win. And so what you see in the chart in the middle is the connection of the S&T enterprise or ecosystem with the warfighter ecosystem and how we move information and need across that little middle border of, hey, we need to get the correct warfighting capabilities to the warfighter. And so you'll see a lot of emphasis on experimentation and wargaming to create the right S&T prioritization going forward. Next slide, please. So again, sense of urgency and strategic patience. So this is, as we said, S&T. So it does take a level of patient investment to turn S&T, to take scientific discovery and knowledge growth into a technology and into a capability. But it is really focused on basically on the same three themes, maybe posed slightly differently. But it is the basic and applied research. It is to focus on basic and applied research to meet the challenge of strategic competition. We are very much focused on improving the S&T tradecraft to do a better job, whether it's protecting information, developing the right priorities, and investing in the S&T areas that will have the highest payoff for the Navy and for the Department of the Defense and for the nation. Then the second area is really this rapid capability, advanced technology development piece, where we're really looking for how do we get the right capability, the right technologies developed into capabilities and transition. That includes the, as we said, growing the performer base, but it also includes feeding information back and doing the wargaming and having fleet experimentation to support that prioritization and just the connection with the warfighter on, hey, here's what's coming, here's how it could be used. So you see the emphasis on experimentation, red teaming, and fleet and force exercises. And then the last one is the foundational piece, right? There is an emphasis right now in the strategy that says we really do need to focus on our strategic partners, both within the country and internationally. So there will be opportunities across both industry, academia, the labs, all the DoD labs, the COIs to really strengthen those partnerships and move forward in a deliberate fashion to support the rapid innovation. And we're really looking for the wider performer base and new partners, but also how do we reinforce and build off of our existing partnerships. And then the last step, which is probably the underlying theme for getting all of everything done, is our next generation of scientists, engineers, and technicians. It is really a difficult challenge to provide the S&T workforce that the Navy needs and really what the nation needs. Next slide, please. So the Naval STEM office has put out their specific strategy. They're really looking at the cultivated diverse world-class STEM workforce to maintain U.S. Navy and Marine Corps technological superiority. You can see who they're looking for. I guess because it does go from elementary school through the current workforce, we could say it is K through gray, I guess plenty gray on the gray side. So it does support all those, but you can see the expected outcomes are really focused on. So it is really focused on trying to generate that STEM workforce. Next slide, please. So the enacted budget, right? So you can see both the S&T and non-S&T lines. This is the O&R budget. You can see the slow, steady growth. We could argue whether that's sufficient, but then you can also see what the proposed is. Honorable Ms. Shyu said what FY25 is looking like. Obviously, this includes our congressional ads, which have very much helped out and is very much appreciated to let us execute the S&T required in the workforce and to develop the workforce that's needed. Next slide. And so really going forward, what you see within the Navy the naval S&T strategy. This is in the, I guess, whatever page, Form 5, talks about the SecNav's enduring priorities: strengthening maritime dominance, building a culture of warfighting excellence, enhancing strategic partnerships. But you also see what that builds into from the S&T strategy. So strengthening maritime technical dominance, building a culture of science and technology excellence, enhancing naval scientific diplomacy, and the naval warfare alignment. So the prioritization. So what you see across that is those themes are showing up within those S&T, those 11 S&T focus areas, and those themes are showing up across all of the organizations. So if you reach out to Naval X or Global, they will be talking to you in terms of those focus areas and the specific ability to try to do the right prioritization and the right capability development. So that is the focus is ONR sort of pivots towards how do we do this better with the threat that we're seeing right now, and then how do we do it with the enduring priorities of excellence and naval dominance. Over. Anyway, thank you and I'm looking forward to your questions.
Good afternoon. I'm Kristen Baldwin, and I'm going to give you an overview of the Department of the Air Force Science and Technology Program and our priorities. S&T is critical to meeting both Air Force and Space Force mission needs to provide us near-term as well as critical long-term advantage by advancing innovative and disruptive technology that can provide operational value, but also accelerating the transition of mature technology and growing and maturing technology for that critical long-term advantage in those critical technology areas that you've heard mentioned already by my colleagues here today. If you go to the next slide, you can take a look at the way that we are organized. Since we do have 2 services and 2 acquisition executives, we retained 1 S&T lab, our Air Force Research Lab. And so we work hard to allocate the research to align with the needs across both of the services and their future force mission needs. Going to the next slide, how do we derive our priorities? So across the top of this slide, you can see our national security strategy, national defense strategy, and as has been discussed already this afternoon, our national S&T, national defense S&T strategy. And as Ms. Shyu mentioned, the memorandum identifying the DoD critical technology areas. All of that derives down to our Department of the Air Force S&T strategy. About just a couple of years ago, we published a Department of the Air Force S&T 2030 strategy, and that talks about aligning with transformational S&T needs. About 20% of our portfolio aligned with transformational disruptive technology needs that can provide operational value in the nearer term, and 80% in this more long-term and enduring investment area, as well as providing us guidance and direction on maintaining our science and engineering workforce and infrastructure now and into the future. Along the middle and the bottom of the slide, we are focused further and more specifically by our mission objectives, or the operational imperatives that are set by our Department of the Air Force leadership. So there's 7 operational imperatives that our secretary has identified, listed in the middle of the chart, and they are also underpinned by 4 cross-cutting enabling capabilities that have been identified as critical to maintaining dominance in our airspace and cyber missions, particularly in the face of peer competitor threat. So what our science and technology activity does is derive technical gaps, technical capabilities, and enablers that are needed to meet these operational imperatives. So if I go to the next chart, you can see those operational imperatives listed again at the top of the chart. And in blue and in black colored text, you can see Air Force and Space Force project initiatives or activities that are focused in these technology enabling areas for each of those imperative capabilities. And then in the middle of the slide, we of course have, that kind of provides, that top of the area provides more of the emerging 6.3 investment areas. We align our 6.2 investments with the, you'll see the 14 critical technology areas there. And then our foundational basic research is exploring more basic scientific, which, just to point out a few, the enabling technology area that was mentioned before, quantum, cognitive and machine intelligence, human performance technologies, biotechnologies, just to name a few. And then our 6.1 investment is also critical to maturing our STEM workforce, our international partnerships and agreements, and different apprentice and future talent programs, which I'll discuss on a future slide. So I talked a little bit about transition, and on the next chart, it depicts what we view as the capability development pipeline. So driving us on the left-hand side are those operational imperatives, future force design, demand signals, requirements, whether they come from our COCOMs or our MAGCOMs. Those drive our requirements and S&T priorities and gaps, as I've described a little bit. On the right-hand side of the chart, we have depicted our set of tech transition pathways. So we've heard from Ms. Shyu and the R&E guidance, 4 basic pathways. Army discussed having, kind of 10 focus areas. We've identified in the Department of the Air Force 6 key pathways that we're measuring of how we can take our S&T investment and have this transition either to a new program, an upgrade to an existing system, advancements in software, more iterative software capabilities, transitioning to industry or other DoD partners and agency partners. So in the middle of this pipeline is what we're really trying to connect with our modeling and analysis, our warfighting analysis, our science and technology investments aligned with prototyping and experimentation investments that come out of our 6.4 budget activities, and then into our early program, early systems engineering, early acquisition strategies. All of those investments help come together to eventually on-ramp through a transition pathway. And underpinning all of that are these tools that we have through our AFRL's S&T budget, our AFWorks, our partnership with our defense industrial base and commercial partners, as well as our international partnership. And so what you'll see emerging as we transform for great power competition is this trying to bookend our science and technology, so to speak, with a clear demand, a clear and prioritized demand signal on the left, with our transition pathways focusing on transitioning that enabling capability on the right. I'll go to the next slide. Here's a look at our FY25 President's budget. You can see that depicted on the bottom of the slide allocated by the 6.1, 6.2, and 6.3 investments. This includes our Space Force as well as our Air Force Science and Technology. The pie chart shows you the allocation across those activities. And then sort of the histogram at the top shows you historically where the green bar is where our PBs have been, our president budget requests have been, and then the white addition is what the enacted budgets have been. So where there may have been additions to what the Department of the Air Force President budget request was. You'll see some of those differences in the enacted budgets versus those requested budgets. Moving on to the next chart, as you've seen by some of my colleagues here, and has been mentioned, we allocate and align our science and technology investment across those 14 critical technology areas. I point out on the top left-hand side of the pie chart, there's a wedge that's labeled other activities. And these would be areas that are not identified specifically as being a critical technology area for the department, but are critical technology needs by the Department of the Air Force. And if I just orient you to that gray box, in that box is some examples of the types of investment that are maybe not specifically aligned to a CTA, but that we're investing in munitions, in turbine engines, propulsion, advanced power control, thermal management technology, next generation mobility technology for advanced logistics, and of course, advancements in nuclear S&T, foundational nuclear S&T capabilities. I'd also maybe like to point out that the second largest wedge, so about 28% or so is aligned to that other activity. And then another 26% or so of the S&T budget request is aligned in the three areas that are unique to defense, the three critical technology areas of integrated sensing and cyber, hypersonics, and directed energy. And this kind of makes sense. So in the Department of the Air Force, we want to lead or leverage or watch. We sort of try to make a determination on our investment strategy across the 14 areas in areas where we need to be leaders, because perhaps the industrial base or the commercial technology base won't necessarily be there leading in those unique defense areas, or where we can absolutely leverage across our partnerships or with the commercial and defense ecosystem, or where we know that there's going to be large investments made by commercial, but we need to make maybe some smaller investments to co-develop and be there with them so that those commercial technologies can be usable by our Department of Air Force war airmen and guardians and obtaining that military value. In our next slide, I just wanted to highlight the locations of our S&T enterprise across the United States, as well as in several international sites that are depicted here. We have a very diverse set of expertise across all of these sites, and as well as a diverse set of facilities and infrastructure that bring to bear our ability to develop mature and transition technology. On the next slide, I will point out a little bit more about our CyberSitter program of work. The AFWorks and also SpaceWorks program, they're together in one organization, and integrated in a common AFWorks and SpaceWorks program. They are our lead for commercialization of our technology. So they're leading our CyberSitter program activities, which are on average about $1 billion a year based on the TOA and based on the investment in RDT&E in the Department of the Air Force. We've seen great successes in increased numbers of new entrants, new partners to the Department of the Air Force, new companies that have not traditionally been engaged with us in the past. So we've grown the portfolio by over 2,200 companies, and we're counting, I think at last count, we've identified over 300 transitions through our phase 3 program, as has been mentioned by some of the others, my colleagues here today. On the bottom left, I'd point out that we also have a technology transfer program. This is an office within Air Force Research Lab that manages our cooperative agreements and partnerships, our DoD partnership intermediaries, which are organized and designated entities that that supplement our government workforce. And also this office manages our patents and licensing and publications activities. On the right-hand side, we mention ways in which it's so critical that we engage with the DoD ecosystem, whether it be through the Defense Innovation Unit, DIU, or our National Security Innovation Network. It's really very important that we not uniquely engage with the small business and commercial enterprise, especially considering you can see the commonality across the critical technology areas that we're all investing in. So we partner very, very well with DIU and the ensign to have jointly kind of motivating and messaging to the small business as well as the venture capital community, so that they have a good messaging, a good understanding of where their investments are going to have interest and hopefully that long-term payoff. We also are able to co-invest in areas, and we really appreciate the opportunity to leverage sort of enterprise-wide capabilities that can help us to do quicker contracting, database of being aware of who's got what technology, so we can make it easier on small businesses over time who don't want to have to go through necessarily the burden of having to propose through 4 or 5 or 6 different sitter program organizations, but we're seeking, and we're really appreciative of the partnership that we can make to create these enterprise-wide sitter capabilities. Next chart. I just wanted to mention as well about our STEM program. It had been about almost 10 years since we had updated our STEM strategy for the Department of the Air Force. I'm so proud to say that we've just published our Air and Space STEM Outreach Strategic Plan. You should be able to find it and access it. And it really looks to grow in our focus, not just STEM in general, but STEM for critical technology needs that we have in the DoD and in the Department of the Air Force. We seeks to grow our distribution of our STEM programs and our coordination of our STEM programs so that we can leverage all of the different local sites. We have 45 base sites that are actively engaged in STEM activities. The opportunity to continue to grow and outreach through those base sites to the local ecosystems that they're next to, as well as to, for example, DoD investments in manufacturing institutes. A major objective of every one of our manufacturing innovation institutes is education and workforce development. And so they're developing programs. We can leverage each other's programs and take advantage of the variety of local, state, and federal sites that we have to share those programs and reach even more students and population. So in 2023, we were able to reach about 800,000 students and 16,000 teachers. Another great project that I'm really thrilled about is the Legacy program. In our president's budget in 25, we've identified this as a sub-element to our basic research program. So inside of our 6-1 program, we now have a project called Legacy. What Legacy does is it tracks, much like you might think of how am I recruiting my sports teams for the NFL draft. You know, we start young, and we know who those students are who have an interest in STEM, and so we have an ability to try to continue to encourage not just outreach to our K through 6 junior STEM leaders, but then also re-engage with them as they wanting to become junior apprentices, and then transitioning to interns that might be able to also then grow in their interest for the Department of the Air Force, the Department of the Defense, critical technology areas, and then introducing them to on-ramp opportunities for jobs through our Smart Scholarship program and other workforce on-ramp programs. We're finding that this program is about 37% of the students that were engaged with through Legacy are coming on board to the DoD for their careers, which in a competitive market that we're in today is really, really outstanding and very, very important. And so with that, my last summary chart. Our science and technology portfolio is very aligned with our National Defense S&T strategy and our DAF, Department of the Air Force priority needs. We make deliberate recognition of the opportunity across both of our services, Air Force and Space Force, for our science and technology to transition to and through. We're focusing on science and technology, sort of bookending it. How do we focus for great power competition on a very, very focused, prioritized set of future force needs? And then how can we transition effectively through those 6 pathways and ultimately providing operational value and capability to the warfighter? And with that, I'll transition to Dr. Tompkins.
All right, thank you. All right, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Stephanie Tompkins, and I serve as the Director of the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, or DARPA. What I want to try to do today is give you a little bit of a feel of what we're up to at any moment in time, and particularly, of course, this year. DARPA is a really unusual organization in the science and technology ecosystem. As a funding institution, we operate probably from the outside what looks a lot more erratically than my colleagues here and probably the rest of much of the S&T ecosystem. We have a really fundamental mission that focuses on technological surprise. Can I stay on the other slide, please? Our role is to focus on making pivotal investments in breakthrough technologies for national security. And so, like pivotal, if you think about the technology S-curve, where technology might be sort of gradually migrating, and then you sometimes see it take these really strong near vertical transformations where it accelerates really rapidly in time, and then it moves back into a mode where it evolves more gradually again. DARPA's role is to really focus on that pivot part where we're moving technology into a very rapid transition period. And what that means is we fail a lot. We're really comfortable with failure. But when we succeed, those successes are typically quite transformative and disruptive to national security and often to all of society. So now if we go to the next slide, what you'll see are a few highlights in these little pictures across the bottom of some of the things that we're best known for. That includes things like the ARPANET, that little experiment in networking that we did many decades ago that has grown up and turned into the internet. Stealth aircraft, self-driving cars and unmanned aerial vehicles, prosthetics that operate directly from the thoughts from your brain. And most recently, I don't have a good picture of it because I don't know how to illustrate it well, our investments about a decade ago in mRNA vaccines. To sort of all of that sort of comes back to these key points. Our role is to really focus on those paradigm shifting technologies. We accept and we manage and we celebrate significant technological risk. We are very comfortable with failure as long as the failure was for the right reasons. We don't want to fail because we were sloppy or lazy, but we fail because sometimes the only way to know what's going to happen next is to actually do it. And we are not very comfortable living on technology roadmaps. Our role is to do the thing that, if we are successful, causes everyone else to rip up the technology roadmap and reset, or potentially massively accelerate it. And then, of course, if we fail, what you really want are those roadmaps to be in place without DARPA disrupting them and continuing to move the technology forward. So there's sort of a push-pull. You really, really need a strong and healthy science and technology ecosystem that is gradually moving technology, ever forward. And then sort of a shock to the system regularly that comes on those occasions that DARPA is successful. Now, in order to do what we do, we have a really unusual business model. And I think that's a thing that's important for people to understand, because it will help inform a lot of the things that you see on the outside when you see our announcements, or if you get funded by DARPA and you're interacting with us. So in order to be able to be comfortable with risk at all times, we design almost every aspect about how DARPA runs to go against a lot of sort of human nature and our basic instincts. So one of the things that happens when people work in technology fields or in almost any job is that over time you become very comfortable. And typically at DARPA, around the time that you get comfortable, this is for all of our program managers, we kick you out. And you really need to be leading forward and have this sense that you are running out of time in order to be comfortable with the type of risk that we want to take on. So that means that DARPA people are constantly rotating. Our program managers are also coming in constantly, and they come from all parts of the S&T ecosystem. So they absolutely come from the government labs, they come from universities, they come from industry and nonprofits, and everybody is coming as expert in their own field with significant tolerance for risk and this commitment to trying to use their 4 or 5 years that they have at DARPA to fundamentally change the world. If we go to the next slide, you can see how that sort of plays out in this little placemat chart I have that tells you a little bit about many different things at DARPA. So if you start on the upper left, understand that while a lot of the things that we do have significant societal impact, we are always tied back to fundamental national security goals. So those include defending the homeland, deterring our adversaries, and increasing global stability. But we do have an incredible luxury of being able to work across any combination of all of the domains that you see there. So space, air, land, sea, subsurface, and then not just in the physical world, but of course in the virtual, electromagnetic, and social domains as well. We're a fairly small organization, under 300 government employees. And a constant turnover of our program managers and, more importantly, our programs. So in any given year, DARPA will typically start between 40 to 50 new technology programs, but we are also very actively calling our existing programs and looking at what's happening in the world and what kinds of outcomes we are striving to achieve and realigning our investments to make sure that we're delivering the type of impact that we have been chartered to do. On the right-hand side, if you take a look, I've got a bunch of what we call example portfolios. On the 2 columns on the right, I think will give you a sufficient sense that we tend to organize our technology more by outcomes and impact rather than the technology itself, because we are so often having to be multidisciplinary in what we do. The 4 things on the left there, Assault Breaker 2, Electronics Resurgence Initiative, AI Forward, and Supply Chains and Logistics, are the only things, essentially the examples of the very few things, we just added a couple recently, that are top down in DARPA. Everything else is bottoms up. We bring those program managers in, we tell them to change the world, and they tell them what we need to be investing in, what programs we have to start in order to make that happen. And then, of course, what you see in the bottom is we are always working across many different technology areas, looking for emerging opportunities and potential breakthroughs that we can then take advantage of in order to accelerate and disrupt when we are successful. So with that context, I think it's really useful before we start talking numbers. We can now go to the budget slide. And you can see the both just a little bit of a historical picture. What you've seen with numbers sort of going up and down over the past few years is often driven by some special projects we have taken on. So, for example, last year, I think I talked about this, and it's the same this year, significant investment in microelectronics through that electronics resurgence initiative that I mentioned before. A lot of work in artificial intelligence, and I'm going to come back to that in the next slide. Obviously, key topics like cyber and space. So we do track. Although we don't drive into these technology areas, we are tracking them at all times, even while we're looking for these sort of problems focused and outcome focused ways of prioritizing our technology. So what you see at the bottom, we don't maintain any laboratories, we don't maintain any infrastructure. So aside from our people, rent on our building, and a fairly generous travel budget, our money really does all go out to the funding of projects. Say a little over 2/3 of that goes to industry. And by the way, on our total budget, in any given year, typically close to 30% goes to small businesses. Because with the level of risk that we take on and the cost of disruption, it makes total sense that small businesses are much more, are very well aligned to that risk profile. So in addition to the SBIR or including the SBIR and STTR programs, we are still fundamentally interacting about 30% of our budget with small businesses. So again, at any given year, 17 to 20% goes to universities. That's through both 6.1 and 6.2, and even in some cases 6.3 funding. So what I want to do next is just pick, there are a couple of things that I get asked routinely. So if I think back on all the most frequently asked questions when I'm talking to people about DARPA, I've sort of picked two that I wanted to highlight, and then we'll get ready to turn over to questions. So if we go to the next slide, I wanted to talk a little bit about AI and machine learning. And I think this is a question that my colleagues probably get asked a lot too. Like, why on earth is DARPA continuing to prioritize AI when we could just pay industry, commercial industry to do this for us? And this kind of an example, actually, it lends itself very well, of course, to AI and machine learning, but I think it actually applies to a whole variety of other things that are happening in the commercial space. So if you look at this chart, I've got industry on the left and DoD on the right. In the world of machine learning, industry has access to massive amounts of data. In the problem space that DoD works on, we are typically working much more on the kind of the tails of that Gaussian curve. We are looking at rare events. We don't have massive amounts of data. So we fundamentally often have to think differently about the algorithms that we develop, which means we need you to be helping us solve different kinds of problems, often in very different ways. Industry is totally naturally and appropriately driven by profit. We are not. And sometimes the problems that we need to solve are never going to be high profitable kinds of technologies, but they are absolutely critical for our mission. So again, that purpose-driven nature of what we do tends to drive the kinds of technology investments we make. The consequences of being wrong in industry are not that high. The consequences of being wrong in the DoD means people's lives are lost. And that is something we take extraordinarily seriously. And finally, let me say that in industry, most often, not always, but most often, you are actually able to take advantage of the forces of competition. And while all of us also thrive on the fact that we have this incredibly rich and diverse and competitive, kind of economy out there, one of the things that we are able to do in the government is sometimes bring together and convene multiple organizations who wouldn't ordinarily be around it. And that cooperative force, where we can think a little bit about those common areas where people might want to cooperate, but it isn't always their highest priority, is something that we are able to do. And you'll see that embedded in a lot of DARPA programs. So anybody that was thinking about asking about AI and machine learning, hopefully I've already given you some of my answers there. And one thing I will highlight that I think is a good example of some of this is for those of you that are still maybe thinking about competing, one of our big ongoing prize challenges right now is the AI cyber challenge. We announced it last year in Las Vegas. Semifinals will be in August of this year at DEF CON, and then the finals will be next year. This is entirely driven around using AI and using machine learning to assist with discovering and fixing vulnerabilities in infrastructure code across our national, not just DoD, but national infrastructure. And I wanted to point that out because as part of that program, Google AI, OpenAI, Microsoft, and Anthropic have all agreed to provide access to whatever the very latest large language models that they have to our all of the competitors in this program. And that's an example of that convening capability that I think the government brings when we need to solve problems that no one else will. All right. Now, the next question I get asked most often, and we can go to the next slide, is given how weird DARPA is, that we are unpredictable and we might be ending some programs and starting new ones and moving very, very quickly. How on earth can anybody navigate this process of figuring out how to work with DARPA? And, you know, it's been a major sort of passion area of mine to make sure that we don't automatically or unintentionally bias ourselves towards only those organizations that have a long history of working with us and know us really well. So one of the things we launched last year, and so we just finished 1 year of this new initiative, something called DARPA Connect. And that is it's a partnership intermediary, as Kristen had talked about those, a partnership intermediary agreement with a nonprofit organization that is essentially managing what I think of as this quite extraordinary DARPA help desk. So anything you ever wanted to know about working with DARPA, including very real, immediate, near-term practical questions, contact DARPA Connect. They have a website. On that website, they have everything from training, like how to actually interpret a DARPA broad agency announcement, how to find a DARPA program manager, how to contact and connect to a DARPA program manager, how to write a proposal. A lot of organizations out there simply don't have the time and support to write proposals. And we have a very structured evaluation process, which means we are evaluating our proposals only on the merits, essentially, of what is written. We're not using outside information. And so there are things like that we have felt have been barriers for a long time from organizations that want to work with us and haven't been able to. DARPA Connect is designed to help overcome as many of those barriers as possible. They're also holding pop-up events throughout the year across the country, both virtually, but again, in different parts of the nation. They are participating in unclassified DARPA Proposers Days. Part of what they will be doing is holding workshops after every broad agency announcement in order to help interested parties look for teaming opportunities and understand how to sort of dissect and write to the questions that we're asking for. And they provide a lot of customized support and mentoring for those that want it. So I think with that, you might have gotten the flavor that almost any other question you ask me, my answer is going to be go to DARPA Connect. It's starting to save me a lot of time in the in my presentations. I wanted to make sure we left as much time as possible for open Q&A with everybody. So I think I'm turning it over to Lorena.
Thanks, Dr. Tompkins. I'm Arun Serafin, Executive Director of NDIA's Emerging Technologies Institute. Thanks to all our speakers for the great presentations today. We're going to move to the question portion of the event now. First, we're going to take questions from our co-host. But if you in the audience still have questions, please add them to the Q&A box at the bottom of your Zoom screen. First, I'm going to call on Hanan Saab, Associate Vice President for Federal Relations at the Association for American Universities. Hanan, please turn on your camera and ask your question.
Thanks, Arun. Thank you so much, everyone, for this great presentation today. The National Defense Science and Technology Strategy states that DoD will increase partnerships and enhance communication with members of the defense innovation ecosystem, including academia. We hear regularly that institutions of higher education are interested in working with DoD, but find it difficult to engage or to learn about new opportunities. Dr. Tompkins, I know you mentioned DARPA Connect, which is a wonderful resource. Are there any other planned activities or initiatives to better connect and communicate with potential partners, particularly institutions of higher education across DoD?
Yeah.
Probably right.
Go ahead.
So the answer is, yes, there are, but there are going to be more. That's actually some of the initiatives I talked about in my confirmation hearing, how I want to really expand the way we communicate to the overall community, but focusing really on our universities as well as the small business communities. I think that there are definitely some institutions that need help. And so when I heard about DARPA Connect today, I was like, oh my gosh, that sounds like my idea. Like we want to do road shows and pop-ups, but we also want to have a help repository, a place where communities that don't exactly know how to meander or to find what they need, they have a central access point to give them that information, but also to help them with supporting them on proposals or other initiatives that they may want to collaborate. If you note, there are the opportunities to create creatives with the government, and that can be a process that can be awful difficult and lengthy. I would also like to shorten that process time so that we can enter into partnerships more frequently with our universities and communities of academia.
I'll just add on to that, as Heidi. We have a lot of universities affiliated with the Manufacturing Innovation Institutes, right? This is where a lot of students get trained in 9 different manufacturing innovation institutes. The other things that we do quite a bit, we engage quite a bit with university. Just about a couple of weeks ago, we actually engaged with 21 Hispanic serving institutes. It was a 1.5-day session, literally talking about how do we do a better job of helping those institutes solve problems that they may have at an undergraduate level, at the graduate level, at the faculty level. And also how do we help them to I would say help our 2 institute to grow into our 1 institute. So we have a lot of engagements with university. I would also say Dr. Bindu Nair, who certainly works for Dr. Ericsson, she's head of my basic research organization. She engages regularly with universities every single week. Okay, so please reach out if you have anything specific questions. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Next, we'll have Debbie Altenberg, Vice President for Research Policy and Advocacy at the Association for Public and Land Grant Universities. Debbie, please turn on your camera and ask your question.
Hi, thanks Arun, and thanks everyone for the presentation today. So I think my question actually flows well from Hanan's question. The Department of Defense plays an essential role in the U.S. science and technology ecosystem and can greatly expand opportunities to diversify the STEM workforce. Congress has instructed the department to work with historically Black colleges and universities and other minority serving institutions to widen the talent pool and diversify the science and technology, engineering and math workforce, and expand the types of institutions DoD works with on research projects. As you all know, the National Academies released a report on this in 2022, and they're working on a second report on recommendations for how DoD can implement those recommendations. But I'm just wondering if there are particular programs in the FY25 budget proposal that you all might want to highlight in supporting partnerships with HBCUs and other MSIs.
Well, we
Thank
could
you.
mention that
Yeah.
most recently, there is a new UARC at Howard University that is a partnership with the Air Force. And so they are the lead institution for that. And the Department of Defense also provides support. That is an ongoing activity. So every year we'll be financing research that will occur at that institution. And I know that you may not have seen the email, but they actually were able to select their brand new director, Dr. Sonia Smith, who I've known for a number of years. Lots of experience with NSF grants and others. So we're really looking forward to the collaboration with that historically Black college and university. There are a growing number of ways that we are engaged. I'm also part of the White House Initiative for HBCUs, and the report that you mentioned at National Academies, I actually did the prior report. I was actually the person who wrote the chapter on how to partner with our government agencies and Department of Defense. So I'm also hoping that we can engage more of the minority serving institutions with our SIBR sitter programs, particularly with the STTR programs. We are woefully missing that engagement across the agencies and the engagement of minority serving institution in providing proposals. And so that's one of the other areas that I'd like to see growth occur.
Let me chime in another thing that we ended up doing. We met with about a dozen, basically R3 institutes. These are smaller colleges from rural area in which the general population is pretty economically depressed, right? So one of the things that they had said to us is their students may not even know what are the potential opportunities, because the only thing that they may see around their local area could be the oil fields. Okay, so that's the only job they think about. So one of the things that we decided to embark into is, okay, let's just put little video clips in terms of art of possible, in terms of other jobs. So we reached out to, again, the Manufacturing Innovation Institutes, and they all had like 3-minute video clips. So what they've asked us to do, can you just push this into their phones? They have little YouTube channels. So to show, here are all the multiple jobs that you may have. Since our MII teaches a lot of students on potential jobs and nurture them. So we're in the process of doing that. We've actually created a YouTube channel. We're in the process of loading a little website. So thanks so much for raising this. We will make sure you get connected and basically help us broaden the message. The other thing I want to emphasize to you, Dr. Bindu Nair and I, a year ago, did a swing across 3 different universities of Texas, El Paso, Austin, as well as Rio Grande. And I spent literally the entire week listening to professors, graduate students, deans, and presidents in terms of what are endemic systemic problems that they have. And what we ended up doing was changing our internship program based on what we learned. What we learned is they cannot afford to have their own, daughter or son to be gone for the entire summer. Uh-oh, I think we lost you guys. At least we lost the video.
Okay, they're there.
Oh, you're back. Okay. Okay, so what we ended up doing was changing our internship program so that a student doesn't have to be gone for 6 weeks because the family needed them to help out with the extended family. So we said, let's modify the program so that they can be gone for the first week to one of the service labs to understand what project they can work on, and get to know the people that's sponsoring their project and their internship. And then they can work from home. We've done that during COVID. Everybody learned to work from home. This is not a big deal. So we totally revamped the criteria for the internship based upon the learning that we did from that 1 week of meeting with 3 different universities. So these are the things that we're doing. If you have any other additional recommendation, we're all ears.
By the way, I'm bringing my NASA experience and having 17 interns last summer from all across the country with all different needs based on their family, just being homesick from California or something. We worked with them to meet them where they needed to be because we wanted to recruit the best and brightest. And now I'm here to do the same thing with the Department of Defense, and I hope to be able to implement just some of the ideas that we just already mentioned.
One last thing I want to chime in. There were also a dozen different women colleges that came in and met with us. So basically I asked for their contact information to each of these women colleges, okay? They say they have a lot of very bright young STEM students, but they need job opportunities, right? To help them during summer internship. So literally what I end up doing, I passed this one sheet of contact information from the women colleges to all the UARC directors and all the FFRDC CEOs and to the top 7 primes CTOs to say, hey, here's a list of colleges. If it's close to you, maybe you could offer internship to these young women from women's colleges. So these are the things we're trying to do to help really grow the pipeline.
If I could just add on exactly to what Ms. Shyu is saying. We, in the Department of the Air Force, we know that we're in a competition for talent. And we also know that we're not tapping into the variety of universities available to us across our nation. So we did a study in 2023 to understand where are our recruitment activities currently from across our Air Force and Space Force for STEM talent. And we took that data and then we compared it to what we understand from HBCU and minority serving institutions and all STEM institutions. And now we're going to be setting goals for our recruitment centers for just expanding the footprint. Don't keep going back to always the same university, but how can we create new partnerships, new activities with universities that we're not traditionally going to, and figuring out ways like Ms. Shyu talked about, where we can engage with these students that are maybe not able to move and to where an Air Force base is, but how we can really adapt to increase our talent pool. So we're going to be setting goals on increasing our recruitment footprint.
Great. Now we're going to go to Lauren Ayers, Vice President for Defense and Intelligence at the Professional Services Council. Lauren, please ask your question.
Excellent. Good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity to participate today and for all the information that you've shared. I'd like to follow up on some previous threads regarding the international collaboration in the S&T space. Could you share what strategic priorities or partnerships maybe you're currently working or what you foresee developing among our allies and partners, whether a result of Ukraine or AUKUS Pillar 1, Pillar 2, or others? And then, where can our industry partners best plug in to support those initiatives?
Wow, I tell you, there's a lot of stuff going on with international partners. I will just give you a few examples. How's that? Okay. We have a foreign comparative test program that's been around for decades. Currently, we have 98 active contracts with 26 countries. Okay, this is how broad it is. And what we end up doing is our folks literally go to all the international conferences. And what they find out is they seek to see who have very innovative technologies, right? And they bring the information back to the services. You say, hey, you may be interested in this particular country because this company here is developing XYZ, okay? And they then follow up, okay? So this is how we initiate getting a whole bunch of active program that's ongoing. So for that particular FCT, what we end up doing is literally connecting with those companies in these foreign countries to find out what they have that they're already developed. So it could fulfill one of our capability needs more rapidly. Okay, I'll give you an example. South Korea, they developed 2.75-inch rocket So what we ended up doing, they put an IR seeker in front of the rocket. And we were able to integrate that on unmanned surface vehicle and shot down 6 boats out of 6. That's pretty darn good, right?
That's excellent, yeah.
So these are the kind of stuff that we're doing across 26 different countries. And then if the services test it out and they want that capability, we actually have the acquisition authority to go directly into production. Okay. And then the foreign company has within 5 years to transition their production to the US. So after they start doing production, they're already starting to look for a US partner that can produce quantity beyond 5 years to transition that onshore. Okay, that's just one example. I have a lot of close relationship with Australia, not surprising. Okay, we're integrating many of our capabilities. We actually are sharing quite a bit of classified information back and forth. They have a lot of innovative companies out there as well. So we're looking to how to integrate our capabilities together. For example, we will be integrating our air missile defense systems. It's a huge step forward, right? Okay. So that's just another example. With Norway, they're developing a ramjet engine in which they develop in close collaboration with the Navy, China Lake. Okay, and what they've developed in terms of ramjet engine could literally triple the range. So of course we're interested, right? So they actually demonstrated that capability to the Army last summer. So there's an opportunity for Army to put that onto their weapon system as well. We're engaging with many countries and many different topic areas. I will tell you, last year I literally flew to 7 different countries and engaged with them. With my peer, my contact at the most senior undersecretary level, we literally identify key critical technology area we're going to collaborate together in. So some of those are of mutual interest. And then what we do is establish a technology project agreement that we move forward in terms of start exploring what are the strengths in your country? What are strengths within the US? What are the areas we can collaborate together on? Okay, so those are the things that we do.
No, that's excellent. Thank you so much for that great, very thorough answer. So I'll turn it back over to you, Arun.
Okay, we have time for maybe 1 or 2 audience questions. So first one is a press question from Courtney Alban from C4ISR Net. Ms. Shyu, can you provide an update on Raider? You said in December that 3 efforts have been approved by the DMAG. What's next for those efforts? What's the status for the next sprints?
Yeah, actually, I would say there's 4 efforts that was approved last year, and they're going into production. This is how rapidly we literally are moving. It's heartwarming for me, right? Because the team has worked so hard to do that. I would say each of the Raider activities for each fiscal year has a particular theme associated with it, and it has a scenario that's approved by Secretary of Defense. A lot of those things, so obvious, the scenarios are classified. Okay, I can't really expand into a lot of detail, but I will tell you this particular year, we're going up to a DMAG again this summer. And the rest of the technology we started last year that finished its testing, approved out its military utility are going up to the DMAG. So literally the DMAG will make the decision because every single service is participating in it. If it's proven its military utility and it's thumbs up from the Joint Staff, from the combatant commander and the services, we push it out immediately into production. Okay, so this process works. We're eager to get to the next DMAG.
Okay, last question. for the services and DARPA. A big effort these days is to enhance the readiness, reduce the life cycle costs of systems in the field. Can you touch on a couple of your efforts that are going after the readiness and life cycle cost issues in the legacy force?
Maybe I'll just really quickly, I didn't get a chance to mention the application of digital model-based analytical technologies. This is an initiative that is not unique to S&T, but I think across all the services and OSD, we view data and model-based analysis as an enabling technology to mitigate to accelerate capability delivery, but also reduce sustainment cost by being able to be more involved in understanding of not only production as well as manufacturing, production and maintenance and sustainment technology needs up an early front in the design of our weapons as we conceive them and as we put them on contract. So I would just offer, it didn't get mentioned here yet today, but a lot of effort by all of us in digital material and engineering technologies. And I'll pass it over to others.
Sure. So one thing I want to mention is that a major driver of sustainment is often going to be software and software upgrades, and fundamentally the vulnerability of our software, when we're, not just in the DoD, but everywhere, but very importantly in the DoD, our software is incredibly vulnerable to hacking. And one of the things that we were successfully able to demonstrate a number of years ago is a way of writing software using formal methods that essentially makes it significantly less hackable. I want to say unhackable, but you really shouldn't make statements quite so bold. And there's been enough advancement in this field through multiple investments that it is the kind of technology that should be much more widely adopted. So one of the things we are concentrating on this year is working across the government and with the DIB in order to figure out how to most effectively and most rapidly roll out this way of doing software, which we think would significantly reduce life cycle costs across the board.
I'll chime in one more time. I will say, give Air Force some credit here. The Air Force actually worked very closely with one AI company who literally ingests a cargo plane's 10-year history of maintenance data. So we're not using fake data, we're using our own data, okay? And what it enabled the Air Force to do is to do predictive maintenance, true predictive maintenance, okay? And it was so successful, they expanded that across all the cargo planes, and now it's expanding that to the fighter aircraft as well. So this is exactly how we're saving money in the area of maintenance. Okay, just one example.
Yeah, I guess on the Navy side, what hasn't been mentioned on the sustainment piece, because obviously the digital engineering data side is a big piece of it, is the Navy is focusing just on reducing energy consumption and the crew size of the platforms, right? It turns out that food and energy are the larger sustainment bills that the Navy's seeing. And so just the energy efficiency piece, the automation and AI to reduce crew size ends up being a substantial savings in the sustainment area.
Yeah, I'd like to also add one more thing about the Navy sustainment. The APLU program actually funded one small company that literally so the Navy spent a lot of time removing corrosion, removing paint and removing corrosion. So literally this device helped to reduce the paint and corrosion removal by 94%. Okay, so once this company demonstrated capability, we ended up putting $10 million to procure some of these devices for Navy maintenance. And then the Marines and the Army, the Air Force saw what the Navy was doing, and now they're procuring the same thing. So again, these are the type of stuff that you show in one service and it propagates because of success that's being demonstrated within one service.
All right, well, we'll let Ms. Shyu have the last word. Other than me, I get the last word. So thanks you so much for attending today's webinar, and thanks very much to all our speakers for providing this insight into the FY25 S&T budget request. As a reminder, we did record today's session. We'll post it shortly on the ETI YouTube page. We'll also post the slides on the NDIA website. And that's the page where you registered for this event. I want to take a brief moment to highlight our upcoming conference, which will focus heavily on these S&T areas. This year's NDIA Emerging Technologies for Defense Conference is going to be held August 7th through 9th at the Washington Convention Center. Conference is being developed in partnership with Ms. Shyu's team at R&E, Dr. LaPlante's team at ANS, as well as UCOM and AFRICOM, and a couple of NDIA technical divisions. More information is available on our event website. The URL is there on the screen. We hope to see you there. Thank you all for joining us today, and have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.